And I'm gonna say something, give you an example, brother. And this ain't third party. I was there. Uh, Reverend Sharpton, myself, Don King, Cutman,
Okay.
Charles Etheridge, and there was another brother from Telemundo. Clear Channel had to sell off. This was about 4 years ago, maybe 5. 123 stations. This is a fact. The FCC said you got too many, and a certain amount has to be owned by minorities. We went down there, met with the chairman of Clear Channel, the chairman. Now remind you, he has to sell 123. Don King opened up a letter of credit for $4 billion. I almost fell out the chair, from Wall Street.
Don King?
Don King said, we want, this group of us wants to, how many stations can we buy? Now look at me, brother. I ain't saying I heard, I was sitting at the table. See, people have to understand, most of these stations now cost 150 million, 125 million. So with $4 billion, you would think we would walk away with something.
Yeah.
Well, I'm still waiting. Tick, tick, tick. We didn't get one station.
Why is that?
Because we were talking about the building, having enough stations to begin to build a black talk network, like everybody else has 24/7.
And I was saying to Toombs, I was so bothered by the fact that when I turned the corner here, that there wasn't thousands of people standing there in support of you, because I don't know how many people, from elected officials, appointed officials, that have used this microphone to better their career. But where are they now? They should be called, and you know what, y'all can't say it, but I could say it. They need to be calling WBLS and saying, we want the open line at the same time slot, on the same day, for the same people, and we want to hear what they have to say. We want our community to be educated.
Welcome to On the Spot. Got an excellent show here. My first guest, Steven Thompson. He's an On the Spot correspondent, and we have Reverend Conrad Tillard here in the middle. On the Spot, we'll be dealing with empowering intelligence for our community. First subject, European election.
Well,
Steve,
we're
open
going to
it up.
get right into it. You hear a lot of information about the global landscape. And the past weekend, there's an issue a lot of people may not understand, but that's what On the Spot's here to talk about. The geopolitical situation. And there's a lot of big words, but essentially, there's a problem in the budget in the European system. And there's a lot of issues that go on with paying back debt. So you have two major countries, France, Germany, and also other countries, Spain. But right now, Greece is at the center of the stage.
Yes.
And what happens is they basically have no money. They're basically close to being insolvent. Now, what does that mean? That means that they can't pay their bills. This is a whole country that basically their debt has overwhelmed them. So France and Germany are trying to work together to figure out how to basically lend them money. And the European Union is 17 union members, EU countries that contribute to a common idea, okay? So right now, the past elections, there was a deal that was worked out. Chancellor Angela Merkel, who is the head of Germany, President Nicolas Sarkozy, who's in France, they had come together to figure out a bailout.
Okay.
Now Greece said, you know what, we don't like this. So the essential situation was they came up with this thing called a story, the idea that you have to cut budgets, healthcare, hospitals, basically what we've seen in the United States on the state level. So we try to talk to the community. This is happening globally. They had elections. The people revolted. They said, you know what, we're going to throw out Nicholas.
Yes.
He's gone. He's gone. And
Got a socialist.
got a socialist. So those type of ideas now are really, they're very uncertain. So right now we're looking at what's going to go on. People don't know. This just happened. The markets in the United States are going to react. So we also have the idea of political interest. Americans' political interests are tied into the success of Germany, France, and of course Greece. So we're going to look at that. We're going to continue. We constantly talk about global. We want the community to know what's affecting their world and some of the issues that go on. Now, we have the Reverend here who travel the world and stuff. Some of your ideas about the parallel between what's going on in our state governments in Germany.
Well, you have some of the same kinds of conversations here in America as you have in Europe. There's a whole idea of austerity. There's a whole idea of pay as you go. There's a whole idea of what are the obligations of a state to its people and its population. Greece and France enjoy the citizens of those countries enjoy tremendous social benefits. They have a tremendous social welfare network.
Long vacations.
Yeah, long vacations.
Subsidized.
And part of what they're pushing back against the Germans and the Brits and others want them to do is shorten their vacations, increase their work weeks. These are part of the things that they're pushing back against. So you see a little bit of the northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere divide in terms of the way the two peoples and the two countries are built and made. But we have similar arguments being made in the United States, where you have people who argue for capitalism and that people should essentially be left to their own devices.
No nationalized health care.
If you are successful in life, you eat. If you're unsuccessful, you don't eat. And so, of course, we're going to hear a lot of this in our own political conversation. And what happens in Europe is going to have tremendous impact upon the American economy. The French election is really interesting because Sarkozy, right of center, a guy, now a socialist coming in. France is going to be very pivotal because it's such an important player. Greece is a small country, but France is such an important player, so that's going to be really interesting.
Well, right now, America is not looking at the parallels because the media is not talking about it as deep as it really is. This is like the conservatives against the socialists of America. Same thing. Same thing. Same ideology. We want less government. Same thing. So now, why isn't it getting a lot of play over here in America?
Well, you have an issue of course, in the financial press, because, of course, the interests of those who own equity, and that's what we define as stocks, bonds, the market moves, the uncertainty of where you're going to put it in the global geopolitical system. So we've looked at a situation where the investment around the globe, so they call these things the BRICS, this idea of countries that are basically, because some of our, let's say, our experience, not our age, but we remember when India was really a backward country in the sense of, I'm not saying the people were backwards, but their economies were. In the idea of the GNP and things like that. Now, they've blown up. And you look at China, which we know is the, 8,000-pound gorilla? So we look at these investments that people are going to get these return on investments over the globe, and you're going to look at not in the United States. And that's what we have the issue about, how we're going to basically develop our economic engine again. When are we going to start it? So metaphorically, it's like GM starting all over again. So this ties into that, and we'll continue with On the Spot, because the community needs to know that this is not just something that happens in Brownsville or Bed-Stuy.
Or overseas.
It's connected.
It's connected to Brownsville and Bed-Stuy.
Exactly. So in that sense, we're going to continue with that, give you the analysis of what's going on, because sometimes it can be very difficult to hear. There's austerity and there's debts, and you hear this thing about 16 billion, 50 billion. Where does this money come from? And what a good cousin of mine said, Steven, how does a country go out of business? That's a really interesting idea. You know, what is it that a country, and we'll get into our next segment about
tax cuts.
What about the idea of the United States getting some close? So,
well, I just think it's so fitting that at the beginning of the 20th century, you talk about India, you talk about China, talk about all these countries that were under a colonial rule of some of these very European states. Now, at the beginning of the 21st century. Europe and America's place in the world economy is threatened right now because these countries are emerging and they are going to have a great impact upon the direction of the world's economy. And boy, the Europeans are scared.
Oh, this is amazing. It's almost like biblical. It says the first will be last.
And the last shall be first. That's right.
And that end.
Right.
Well, China owns a great deal of America's debt.
It does. We're going to have a
great
show
deal.
just on that.
So when whoever has too much debt,
They call it
America could be the next one,
There we go.
going down to the bottom.
That's right.
So we're going to close out this segment, and we're going to be right back after a brief message from our sponsors. We're back. Next subject, OTS, Decision 2012. Obama and Romney, take the gloves off. Rev, open it up.
Well, again, I'm going to go on record again saying that I think African Americans and people who support Obama need to be very concerned about this election. As I said before, Mitt Romney is no walk in the park. He is a capitalist.
Right.
He appeals to a certain significant portion of Obama's base. That's Wall Street.
Right.
And even Hollywood in many respects. I think we need to think about that. I think this is going to be a very tough election. I think that once Romney cleared the hurdle of the Republican primary, again, he is a capitalist who's saying that he can get the economy working again, and it's going to require a tremendous effort on the part of the Obama administration to turn out its base.
Right.
There are some inherent disadvantages that the president has. Well, the first of which is that he has a 4-year record to which he has to defend. He's no longer saying what I will do, but others will be evaluating what he has done. And I think he's done some great things, but we have such a divided electorate. We have such a polarized electorate where people have called him a socialist, and people are on the right are saying that he is destroying the country as we know it. So it's going to be a tough race. That's the important point. And it's going to split right down ideological lines. It could be a repeat of the 2000 presidential election, where you could actually win the popular vote, lose the election, or lose the popular vote and win the electoral college. So it's going to be very interesting.
I'm on the record of saying the Republicans is going to try to steal this election straight up and down. There won't be any secret. They're going to play with them numbers.
Well, I mean, you have to look at the fact that we're going to have a kind of a circle your wagons, because you have a strategy where the Republicans have clearly laid out the super PACs.
Right.
Now, for our community, we know Citizens Union, this idea that you can have unlimited funding.
Right.
And
Citizens
then
United.
you basically bombard the media. Now, it's a very interesting dimension that here's a person who, in the past, you would look at a president that runs and they would say, you know, this man has accomplished on foreign affairs in an American context.
Yes.
Amazing things in the idea that they said that he may not have the basic, let's say, the arms to run and do what's necessary. And he's amazing. He's out, you know, the difference between Romney's foreign experience, no one ever talks about. This man has no foreign affairs experience. And in a global, we just came off talking about the geopolitical issues. You have to be very clear about the nature of someone being able to take you into the 21st century in the context of the globe. Romney doesn't have that. That's not where people are talking about. And they're independent base, and he does. He has a certain resonance with these folks who are independents, and we don't understand it really because he has nothing in common with it.
It's not that deep. What do you say? Obama yesterday spoke out on gay rights.
Well, that's the cultural divide. That's the great cultural divide that seems to be a big issue in America. From the European point of view, they go, we don't understand it, but you have to understand the unique quality of America. It's the historic, the legacy, the idea of where people, how they make their sense of their identity.
But I'm going to chime in. I got a question for you. I'm going to ask you.
Sure.
Can you tell a person of color, how does the president saying he support gay marriage help you if you don't have a job?
Well, I think that's the problem that the president has, and he has the problem of every Democratic president. The Republicans essentially have a small tent.
Right.
They are largely a homogeneous population.
Right.
They tend to be white. They tend to be wealthy. They tend to be, even those that aren't wealthy, they tend to be socially conservative.
Right.
That's a small tent. That's people who would like minds. The Democratic Party is a big tent. It's made up of many constituents. You got gays on the left. You've got labor. You've got African Americans. You've got all of these different constituents. Feminists. You've got a lot of
religious
different
group, African American.
Right. You got the church. Right. So the problem that the president has when he feels pressure, and a lot of those agendas in the Democratic Party sometimes are at variance with each other.
Right.
So when the homosexual lobby pushes him and says, well, if you don't advance the cause on gay rights, you're not going to get our support.
Right.
When the Latino voters that voted for him say, well, you haven't done anything on immigration reform, you're not going to get our vote.
Right.
That's difficult for a Democratic president. Right. But the thing that bothers me the most is that gay rights, gay marriage, if it becomes the law of the land, and I have a great question as to whether it will not. I think you have even the potential for, if not a civil war, at least a breakdown of the national cohesion around that issue. 29 southern states, including North Carolina, just the other day, have said they don't want marriage equality, as the proponents call it, gay marriage, as the detractors call it. The Democrats are now even talking about moving their convention from Charlotte because of it was a overwhelming majority of the people in that state that said we don't want it.
But hold on, not to interject, but Rev, the voter turnout was low. So a lot of people didn't vote.
You know, you can always make that argument and you can always analyze it, but the point is it's carried in I think 29 southern states. And in fact, wherever it has gone to referendum, it has lost. In fact, it's the courts that have essentially kept this in play, and some of the legislatures. And like in New York, it was Governor Cuomo doing a lot of arm twisting, and the legislature that voted for it. If it went to referendum here in New York, I doubt very seriously that it would pass in New York State. And so it's an interesting issue. But my issue is this: African Americans who have historically been loyal to the Democratic Party continue to get shuffled to the back of the deck. African Americans, when we exert our agenda, we're always told, hold on, we got to get elected. The president did not take that same position with the homosexual lobby. They pressed, they demanded, and he responded. And so my question is, if now that he's taken that position on gay marriage, what does that, I'll turn your question around, what does that do for African Americans that don't have jobs, where unemployment is still high? How does that address the needs of poor people, of working class people in this country?
He didn't say he would change legislation. All he said was he supported.
Well, that's his personal opinion.
Exactly.
But the issue is, to the Reverend's question is, what is the African American agenda? Especially in an economic sense.
Well, if you would have learned something, you want to know what we as people of color should have learned?
What?
That they put their money where their mouth is.
But that's the key issue.
We start by money.
We start by money.
We start by money. And our problem, and I talk to people, and we talk to people about this, is every other group donate money. The Jewish community donates money.
Yeah, but
so they have influence.
That's true. And
so
what you're saying is absolutely
we
right.
never, in our community, we never talk about the money factor. That's why you don't get anything, because if you don't put money in your legislative pocket, they can't get any ads.
The money is important, but I will remind both of you gentlemen that there are more African Americans than any of those special interest groups that you talked about. We could just leverage our vote. We don't leverage our vote the way it should be. Certainly, we should become more part of the money game of politics. But even with the overwhelming numbers and the level of consistency that we've shown in terms of voting straight down the Democratic line, if we had leaders, if we knew how to leverage that more, we would still be in a strong position.
I'm going to close out, I'm going to say something. It starts with our elected officials. In Congress, we have the Black Caucus. And I always had a problem while Obama was in office, they were loyal voters and did not tell them, listen, the Blue Dog said, we're not voting with you.
That's right. That's
when
true.
They should have turned around and told Obama, if you're not doing this, you're not getting our vote, because you still have about 50.
It goes back to that old saying that the Democrats know that blacks have nowhere to go. I've always advocated for a 30-70 strategy.
There you go.
70% Democrats, if that's what we want to be. But I think we should have 30%
In the
of our
Republican
people
Party.
in the Republican Party,
Okay.
so that we are able to leverage our vote.
Well, let's
That's a
start
good
with
idea.
Congress. Tell the Congressional
Congressional
Black
Black
Caucus,
Caucus.
from now on, don't just go along to get along.
Okay.
We'll be right back.
They don't
after
know
this
anything
message.
else. They don't know how to do anything else but that.
We will be back. We're back. Interesting conversation we was having.
Great.
On the Spot Extra is going to be something today. We're back with local media and the landscape of what's been going on in New York City.
Well, let's set the stage. We've got major media movements in the history of New York City media and
so
probably
on
the
the spot.
country on
So
the
they're
spot.
on the spot.
We're going to have a new website coming up, so we really want to. We'll tell you about that at the end of the show. But what happened in New York, the major market, no denying that. You have two major stations, WBLS 107.5 and KissFM 98.7.
Rev used to work on 107.
Conrad. So what happens is these two major urban stations represent the audience of African American or
Yes.
people of color or urban. The most recent idea is urban radio.
Yes.
So Emmett Broadcasting, who owns Kiss FM, said, you know what, we're not making enough money. Arbitron is the measurement for these folk, and they said our share 3.2, 3.5 is not enough to pay the bills. So what we're going to do is lease it to ESPN, make a huge amount of it. It's like a $900 million deal, amazing amount of money. They couldn't leave it on the table. Sell the intellectual property rights. Now you can do that. You can sell everything that represents Kiss FM will now go to BLS. Only problem is everybody who's become, they spent around 30 years. What happens to these DJs? These shows like Open Line,
Week in
Review.
Review.
Week in Review.
Gospel.
These staples, gospels. So we now have a situation where BLS is the only outlet
Right.
for urban radio, maybe African American folk, political, social, entertainment,
Not
everything.
the only. Let's not say the
Well,
only.
I
We
would
got
say in the sense of the
10
major,
yeah.
in the sense of the numbers. We're saying the aggregate numbers. So that's where we're at right
Yeah,
now.
well, certainly FM radio.
FM radio.
And of course, fewer people listen to AM radio because
Yeah.
you got RL.
Exactly.
And you got, Inner City Broadcasting's AM station, WLIB.
Right.
But thank God, because now with the information superhighway,
Right.
you have shows like On the Spot.
Without a doubt.
But I heard a woman say one Sunday morning, 2 Sunday mornings ago, that when she found out Kiss was going off the air, she said she didn't know what she was going to do on Sunday morning. And I said to myself, well, you can always come to church. I said, but really, when you think about it, if it's not On the Spot, if it's not BET when it was black owned,
Yes.
if it's not TV One, we always have to remember that we had the pulpit in the church
Yes.
as a place where we could communicate information, where we could inspire people long before we had radio stations. And these pulpits are still there. And we need to go back to our institutions that have always been there for us. Because, see, when we become so dependent on a corporate-owned radio station,
there you go.
to whereas when they sign us off, we're in trouble as a community. We are indeed in trouble. But I thank God for the visionary Percy Ellis Sutton, the man
Yes,
who
indeed.
hired me at BLS and LIB and brought me there. He left a place for us. Now that station is under attack also, because it all comes down to, as we have, and this is the fallacy and the mistake of us moving into integration.
Right.
Just because we have more choices doesn't mean that we should not support things that belong to us. And I'm just so sad, because in a city with 3 million black people,
Right.
one major station
Doesn't make sense.
now. That's the only urban station that we have on the FM frequency to listen to, and that's a tragedy.
Well, I tell you something. James May Kiss FM.
Right.
My mentor was on the show here in about 2006. Matter of fact, it was 2006 when the Republicans first got elected.
Right.
And we spoke about this. And Brother James said, look, you own this here, so they can't really take it away.
right.
That's right.
He said on any given day, and it'd be shocking when I send him this clip, he'll be amazed that we talked about on any given day, they can sell Kiss.
Right.
But he also spoke about, and we'll play that clip, he also spoke about the time they went, Don King had a $4 billion line of credit, and they went to buy some of them radio stations for Clear Channel. So you'll hear what happened with that. He'll tell you that out of his own words. But I say that to say this here. We have a problem because we didn't invest in our own.
Right.
Cutman talked about it on KissFM all the time in terms of the Arbitron ratings and the advertisement agency. I believe they was getting $26 million last year, KissFM, in advertising aid, and this year they got about $3 million.
Right.
And that might have been their demise.
Well, you do. Here's one thing that clearly the Reverend said. We have to look at these institutional, really the historical footprints of African American community. Clearly the church. It does not, an interfaith idea, the church, the mosque,
all of
them came there.
Right.
Now, in the 21st century, we look at the role of social media. We looked at, the last show you talked about Trayvon Martin, how it bubbled up. You said something, to paraphrase, is like it would have been swept under the rug.
Right.
Yes. So black radio has always been the power.
It's the talking drum.
The talking drum. And my brother's always a big advocate of the fact that, we can't lose our culture because not everybody's going to cross over. Not everybody's going to be in the entertainment world. But more than that, we have to be able to say our preachers, our imams have to have a place to talk to our community. We have to own it. Yes. And that's what we're looking at. How can we be in the largest market?
Right.
And only one outlet.
And not only being in a large market, but have had such a visionary like Percy said.
Right.
But, part of this game that Arbitron plays, when you think about African Americans, and we know what the African American listening tastes are. And for many years, black urban radio has never gotten a fair shake with the Arbitron rating system. It was never geared toward taking an accurate reading of our taste. But I continue to say this. WABC here in New York, 770 AM, has shown how you can take an AM frequency and make it a multi-million dollar operation. And I have said, I've talked to the people at LIB, I've talked to the people at WWRL, I have said that in the era of a black president, the fact that we don't have black talk in this city the way we used to in the 90s, it is a crying shame.
No.
And as much as I love gospel music, I'm a pastor. But to have an AM station in this city with a black president in the White House, and all day the station is playing gospel music, and people have to turn to either liberal stations, which have a different politic than the African American politic, or conservative stations to find out what's going on in the world. It's a great tragedy. It's a great tragedy.
Well, it's going to continue until we figure out how we should own our own and what should we do when we have it. Because it's no different than BET and TV One. You keep showing stuff. You're still showing us good times.
Well, it's true.
Good times?
I know. Well, we go all the way back to the different things. I always like when they talked about, BET and the owner at that time, he said, he doesn't let his children watch it. I forgot, Rob Johnson. It's like, well, if you're not going to let your children, why would you let African-American children in large amounts?
Who phone and read television?
Right, watch it.
That's what it comes
But
to.
that's why on the spot, we're going to we're announcing today on this show that we're launching our new website, onthespotnetworks.com. It's going to be coming soon. We're going to let you know it's going to be our launch, but we want you to tune in. Basically, and then also everybody's social media, we want you to like us on Facebook.
Tell them again.
You got to remember, like us on Facebook. That's the key issue. So,
we got a Twitter account.
And we got a Twitter account too.
Like us on Twitter.
Well, you got to follow us on Twitter.
Follow us on Twitter.
All right, that's okay.
It's all right.
You know what I'm saying? He's getting there. He got his iPad, and he's good. But we're going to follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook.
We're out.
And I'm going to keep preaching on Sunday.
There you go.
And you keep putting on shows.
Reverend, what's the church you're at?
Nazarene Congregational United Church of Christ, 506 McDonald Street, here in the village of Bedford-Stuyvesant. All are welcome every Sunday morning, 11 a.m.
Tell them again.
506 McDonald Street, that's at Patchen Avenue, A-Train to Utica Avenue. All are welcome every Saturday.